Greetings and a warm welcome to the Connect Plus Forum on CDFI Operations and Human Capital. I'm Seth Julian, the EVP of Network Services at OFN, and we're delighted to have you with us today. This is our fourth Connect Plus Forum since 2021. We initiated these to address critical industry issues while bringing people together virtually during the pandemic. Our previous Connect Plus forums centered around resilience, CDFI growth, and equitable, affordable housing. This year, we have chosen to focus on CDFI operations and human capital, as the industry has experienced remarkable growth in recent years, coupled with the challenging labor market that makes it difficult to attract and retain staff. We extend our gratitude to our sponsors, the Citi Foundation, JP Morgan Chase & Company, and Wells Fargo for making this free virtual event possible. Allow me to shed some light on why the focus on CDFI operations and human capital is so crucial. Our research team recently published a brief titled Trends Toward Equity, 5 Years of OFN Member Data. The brief showcases 5-year trends in member assets, lending activity, financial performance, staff size, functions, and diversity. You can access the brief on the homepage for this event or visit ofn.org to download it. We will also be sharing a link to the brief in the chat for your convenience. In the brief, we present this figure that demonstrates a rise of nearly 20% in the average number of full-time equivalent employees for our consistent responder members. These members, who consistently participated in our annual member survey from 2017 to 2021, represent almost 150 of our members and are generally more experienced CDFIs who have been with us for a longer time. On the other hand, the average FTEs for our full membership decreased from 26.6 to 24.9. The full membership includes consistent responders, non-consistent responders. These are members who missed a year or two of the survey despite being a member for some time, and new members. OFN's membership has grown from 250 members to nearly 400 since 2019, with the majority of new members being relatively new CDFIs who do not yet have as many FTEs as our long-term members. As a result, we have a growing membership with newer CDFIs in need of support for their daily operations, while our long-term members are increasing their FTEs and facing their own growth challenges. It's important to look at data from our consistent responders because it's a large sample of our membership and it's consistent over the 5-year period. When we scrutinize this data, we find that almost 20% of these members either remain the same in terms of their number of employees or experienced a decrease. On the other hand, 52% of these members saw growth in their employees, ranging from 1 to 50%, while almost 30% of these members observed a significant increase of over 50% in their number of employees. When we analyze the data from both 2017 and 2021, it's interesting to note that the group that experienced over 50% FTE growth saw a significant jump from 15 FTEs to an average of 28.3 FTEs, while the group that grew between 0 to 50% had an average of 45.5 FTEs. So they were already large to begin with. In contrast, the group that either experienced no growth or a decrease had a decrease in their average FTE to 21.4. Growth in FTEs is not the sole indicator of overall growth. When we compare the average total assets and growth saw a substantial increase in total assets to 86 million, which is an 84% increase. The 0 to 50% group also grew with an average of 154 million in assets, while the members who experienced no growth or a decrease in FTEs actually saw an increase in total assets of 37% to 88 million. This data reveals several key points. So number one, these members are experiencing growth in both their FTE and balance sheet. Number two, the highest growth members in both FTE and assets were more of our small to mid-sized CDFIs. And number three, even if members are not increasing FTEs, they are still growing their balance sheet. All of this underscores the importance of the topic of CDFI operations and human capital, and we hope that today's forum will provide valuable learning opportunities for everyone. Don't worry if you can't make all the sessions, as everything is being recorded and will be available to view on demand via CDFI Connect and OFN's YouTube channel within the next week. Aside from this forum, OFN is also doing other things to help our members and other CDFIs during this period of growth. In 2022, OFN was fortunate enough to be selected as one of only 12 organizations to receive a grant from the City Foundation's Community Finance Innovation Fund, which we are using to support our next generation CDFI workforce initiative. This new initiative was developed in response to industry trends and member needs, as highlighted in our latest research brief. With the industry's continued growth in the changing labor market, there is a pressing need to recruit and train a diverse workforce. As a result, through this initiative, our goals are to strengthen the recruitment and development of careers in community development finance, as well as facilitate access to the tools, skills, and expertise CDFIs need, with the ultimate goal of having a greater economic impact in the communities we serve and care about. We're working to address industry talent and capacity needs in 3 ways. First, toolkits featuring leading practices and actionable content. We'll be creating over 30 toolkits over the next few years, covering topics such as capitalization, financial management, lending and portfolio management, governance, HR operations, impact measurement, and communications and marketing. Our first toolkit, CDFI 101, was launched in February to help onboard new staff and provides a comprehensive overview of the industry's history. You can access this toolkit on the OFN homepage or on CDFI Connect. Today, we are excited to launch 2 more toolkits: operationalizing racial equity, inclusion, and accessibility into your lending practices, and talent recruitment, retention, and management, writing effective job descriptions. You can find both toolkits on the homepage. In Q2, we'll be launching 2 toolkits, one on CDFI financial management and the other on strategic and annual operating planning. Second, professional development and training for the entire range of career levels. We are also expanding our in-person training opportunities to include, among other topics, a CDFI 101 orientation, a CDFI financial management workshop, green financing 101, and a racial equity, inclusion, and accessibility workshop. These trainings will be attached to our regional meetings, small business finance forum, and annual conference. At the annual conference in October, we plan to launch our credit training program geared specifically to CDFI practitioners. Finally, our next generation CDFI workforce initiative includes the launch of a new CDFI Career Center. This center will help attract new and diverse talent to the industry and provide resources and on-demand trainings on various topics. The Career Center will feature an enhanced job board that allows CDFIs to post job opportunities and candidates to apply directly on the website. It will also offer information on different CDFI jobs and career paths, as well as videos of CDFI practitioners showcasing the breadth and depth of a career in the industry. We are currently seeking a vendor and strategic partner to help us make the Career Center a success and expect to send out an open RFP soon. Neither this forum nor our next generation CDFI workforce would be possible without the support from the City Foundation. Please welcome City Foundation's Senior Program Officer, Kristen Scheider, who will share some remarks.
Hi, thank you, Seth. I'm really happy to be here and I'm so excited for this event. City Foundation has been a long supporter of the CDFI industry. Starting way back in 1992, we provided a seed grant to a fledgling organization called the National Association of Community Development Loan Funds, now what you know as OFN. That was a big risk for us, but we did it to invest in the growth and innovation of a new segment in the nonprofit sector, Community Development Loan Funds. New segment continues to support growth, innovation across the field of community development finance, such as seeding the program of ERIS to rate CDFIs, funding OFN's previous leadership program, and a wide variety of other community building and capacity building programs for CDFIs around the country. Fast forward to COVID, we witnessed so many of our CDFI partners stretching, growing, and innovating. We saw loan sales and syndications. We saw off-balance sheet lending. We saw third-party originations and a scale and volume of lending that nobody thought CDFIs could previously deliver on. And while it's true that the CDFI industry delivered for America during the height of the pandemic, it's also true that you were stretched to the limits. You experienced staff burnout, turnover, and your operating systems were pushed. Recognizing this moment in time and really not wanting to see the industry slide back to its pre-COVID days, Citi invested $50 million in something we call the Community Finance Innovation Fund to continue supporting growth and innovation in the field and helping CDFIs reinvest in their systems and people. Amongst the 12 organizations that we funded, we supported groups that are focusing on using CDFIs to bridge financing from Main Street to Wall Street. We focused on capacity building and operations for newer CDFIs that are serving underserved markets around the country. And still others are focused on research and really measuring the impacts that CDFIs have on communities and closing the racial wealth gap. But perhaps for us, the most exciting is the reinvestment in CDFI organizations, people, and staff. And that is indicative of our partnership with OFN and the new Career Center and the trainings and the toolkits. OFN has had this as a top of priority and wish list for many years. And we're just so pleased to be able to help bring it to reality and really look forward to the Career Center being a central resource where a young person starting out in their career can really map a career path, access the training, access job opportunities and networking to really have a fulsome career and not need to patch it together, off the cuff. So OFN has great plans to build out this Career Center as a valuable HR resource to the industry and is eager to hear from you on what content your organization will need and are looking to find there. As Seth mentioned, the first toolkits have already been published. You should really check out the one on the CDFI history. It brought back a lot of great memories, but it's also great for people new to the industry to learn about our roots. So it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this CDFI Connect Forum, the first of many that will provide additional toolkits and trainings that Seth described, and that CDFI managers have been clamoring for. So with that, let me thank you and hand it back to Seth for a great session. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to being on this journey with all of you.
Thank you, Kristen. We appreciate your support for this forum and our Next Generation CDFI initiative. All right, so let's get started with our plenary, which is titled Fostering a Culture of Growth. So we have 3 different CEOs of CDFIs joining me to have a conversation about culture, how important it is to their success, and the difficulties of maintaining culture during a period of growth. So please join me in welcoming the panelists. All right, so we have Rosa Rios Valdez is the founder and CEO of BCL of Texas, which she started in 1990. BCL of Texas has around 20 employees. Brad McConnell is the president and CEO of Allies for Community Businesses and has been in his role since 2017. A4CB has around mid-30 employees. And then Amir Kirkwood is the president and CEO of Virginia Community Capital and has been in his role since 2001. And VCC has around mid-80 employees. So thank you all for joining me. So let's kind of get started with our first question. So the question is, what specific values and behaviors characterize your organization's culture, and how do they translate into everyday actions and decision-making? Can you share some examples of how these values are demonstrated? Rosa, can you start us off?
Be glad to. Well, our organization values, some of them are, we're progressive, we're connected, we are innovative, and we inspire creativity. And the way that we embed these values across the organization are within our staff. with the extended partnership and network that we need to have being a statewide organization. And we have ongoing work sessions and events and retreats to inspire our staff to remain excited, engaged, and to deliver on the BCL promise.
That's great. Thank you, Rosa. Brad, what about you?
Thanks, Seth. So in fall of 2020, when A4CV was going through our last strategic planning exercise, we worked with the entirety of the team to come up with what we thought was the best articulation of our core values. So from that, it took a long time, frankly. We landed on accountability, collaboration, respect, and passion. So easy enough to put those on a bulletin board, right? But the real work was to define what really meant by those. And so we put on a4cb.org, these are our core values, and here's what we mean. Bullet pointed out, like a description of what we intend to embody and what we do. So again, like even putting it on your website with some definitions, that's good, necessary, but not sufficient. And so try to take that a step further. And in every quarter, we do our evaluations of each one of our staff. We not only talk to each member of our staff about how you did in meeting your objectives against goal, we also do evaluations against how you did against each one of our core values. And that just generates, I think, really healthy conversations with each member of staff and their supervisor about the work and also how we're doing the work and are we creating the culture that we want.
That's great. Mir, what about you?
Seth, thanks for having me. I think what I think most about our organization, and just I've been here for about a year and 5 months, is really the ability for the organization to adapt to change. As with all CDFIs coming out of the pandemic period, we were called on to be much more than what we had in the past for the needs of our communities. And I was most impressed by the ability for the organization to have changed during that period of time to adapt to communities' needs. But then in dealing with transitions of leadership and having to set a new course and a new path, that same spirit came across the employees of ECC, how they applied the products and how they've been willing to consider going forward, adapting new strategies for how our organization, number one, internally would work together, and then number two, would then let those values and principles find their way out to the communities where we're serving.
So I'm curious, like Brad mentioned a little bit, but I'm curious how these values like show up. Like how are you reinforcing these values with employees? Are there anything like unique or creative that you're doing just to make sure that staff are just like living up to like the values that you have? So Rosa, you're shaking your head. You want to give some examples?
Yeah, we've done several things over the years, and we continue to encourage staff to trust each other, that we all need to be leaders. And so some of the things that we've done creatively, we've done rowing exercise where we actually go with an instructor and we pick our canoes and we row on Ladybird Lake. We've done some scavenger hunts. And that's been incredibly exciting because you have to follow the path and you have to trust the role of the team. And of course, you want to win. And then we've also done escape rooms. That's fun. It's exciting. You have to, again, have that teamwork and that creativity of how to get out of that escape room and be a winner. So we do several things across the year with our staff development. And those are some of the fun things that we've done. For me, for the scavenger hunt that we did, and my team was the winner, you had to trust the driver because we were driving across downtown Austin and we'd have frequent stops. We had to go steal construction cones and then return them later. But
you're doing some serious stuff, okay?
You have to trust that driver in getting you there and making sure you stay within the timeline.
That's great. I think the only escape room I've ever done, my 7-year-old daughter ended up yelling at me because I messed up and we didn't finish in time. But Amir, what about you? Any kind of specific examples?
Sure. I think where we have been on our journey in the last few years has really, and really the last year or so, has been to sort of actively restructure ourselves, given the diversity of the sort of businesses and services that we provide, to be a little bit more of a cohesive management model. The way I look at it is sort of really how do you get opportunity and accountability together in a way to lead. And so we had historically a much more top-down CEO and people with chief in front of their names driving the business. And what we've done is we've restructured to form a management company that really lifts up the folks who are leading the different areas of business to be more a part of the decision making going forward, and really holding more people within the organization to become a part of the process of making decisions. So if we decide to go to a new product, enter a new product or enter a new service, we have something we built called a business product and development committee where anyone in the organization can propose a new product, but they just have to be willing to take it through that process, and they can benefit from the feedback across the organization to do so. So that's really kind of an example of what I would sort of say.
And how did that kind of go over, Amir? Just like with rolling that out, and just like that sounds new and exciting.
Growing pains. Anytime you introduce something new, there's probably a few phases. One is sort of, what is it actually going to look like? How's it going to work? And then the second phase is sort of the trust part of it. Can I trust that if I actually use this process, it will actually, lead to an outcome? Or is it going to be Lucy with the football kind of pulling it back at the last minute? And so what we're really trying to ensure is that things that are started by staff through process kind of make their way all the way through. Good or bad, maybe we do something, maybe we don't, but people can feel confident and trust that the process actually allowed for what they were trying to do to come to fruition.
That's great. Brad, what about you? Any other examples that you want to point out?
Well, first of all, yes to Rosa and Amir, both of that. I'll just add to that I think for us to curate the culture that we want, we have to be willing to allocate the most precious resource we have, and that, of course, is time. So we've tried to be very deliberate in a way that I'll just say transparently is not natural for me. I'd prefer to be like, go, get the work done, but I've got really smart people who thankfully work on our team who have made really good suggestions. So just a couple examples of that. Each year we have a January launch sequence where this past year we spent 20 hours on 20 different topics, 1 hour per, doing deep reviews and previews. We just accomplished what we're trying to accomplish in the new year. And then also some very specific subject matter items where we need to spend real time together in order to have a common understanding about the facts on the ground here across departments so that everyone can see how their work is tied into everyone else's work. And then over the course of the year, we've got 9:30 a.m. on Mondays, weekly launches where we talk about the milestones in everybody's lives, the wins that we've recently had that everybody really wants to celebrate, that brings out that passion element of our 4 core values. And then what's coming up? What opportunities do we have together in order to share learning and explore what we're trying to accomplish together? And finally, we have a rotating set by department of who's going to report out for accountability purposes on what we just accomplished in the previous month and what's coming up, and how those actuals sit against the goals for that particular department, how they fit into how everybody else is seeing all that. So
I'm just curious. So I'm just on that. So it's all staff that is
all staff.
All staff. And then how are you reinforcing your, like, in visuals in any way? Are you like reinforcing like where you are to milestones at all?
Yes. So we have a centralized data repository which has a Power BI front on it. So we visualize by department every month, and then obviously in the quarter we do that for the whole of the quarter, how we're doing against goal. And then we pair that with, as I mentioned before, the evaluations, how we're doing against our 4 core values. And that's done individually, which then we sort of, in theory, roll up for the whole of the organization. So there's a whole bunch of other things we're doing on allocation of time as well. But those are the key components that I think mean that we're trying to we're getting better at getting the balance right between focusing on getting the work done and doing so in a way that creates the kind of work environment that we all want to be in.
No, that's great. I mean, I think these are really important things to share that I know I've heard from lots of different members just as they're, growing. This is really helpful. So I want to transition a little bit to kind of this growth phase that we're having, right? So I kind of laid it out. We've seen a ton of kind of growth, both from balance sheet and from staff. So, I mean, how have you been able to manage that balance between like this growth phase with like maintaining your organization's culture? And has there been if there are any growing pains in that, could you kind of share what you've learned? Amir, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think an example for us was we are literally, as we speak, completing our strategic plan for the next 3 years. And it was a unique moment because it was not just a traditional 3 year strategic plan, but it was also a plan tied to a new leadership from a founder CEO to a transitional CEO leading the organization. And over that time, about 4 different distinct businesses have been built at VCC. There's our bank, there's a nonprofit loan fund, both of which are actual CDFIs. But then the third business we have is something called Locus, which provides advisory and fund management services to impact investors. And then finally, we were asked to help launch something called the Community Investment Guarantee Pool, which provides financial guarantees on affordable housing and small business and environmental products. So that's a lot, much more probably than the original founding CEO envisioned she would be leaving the organization with. And the organizations, the parts of it were moving in different directions. So growth was happening. Growth then got impacted by a pandemic period where we all collectively across the sector probably picked up 2 or 3 other unique roles that we were asked to play in the communities that we're in, from PPP lending to grant programs we might be delivering at local levels. So all of these things are sort of swirling at once. So our growth challenge was really centered around one, of all of these wonderful things that we're doing and we're involved in the community, what are the best things for us to be doing going forward, given that we do have limited resources in order to be effective? And 2, how do we design ourselves to be able to lead to that outcome? So the biggest pains have been a lot of introspective learning from ourselves as an organization. I think the key element to being able to do that effectively with some integrity around your teams was, and Brad, you mentioned this earlier, with your strategic planning process, committing to making sure everybody has a part and a role in it. From the planning teams you obviously have to form, but really making sure that every single employee is able to touch that process and give their input. And again, that it has some credibility to them, whether it ultimately reflects what 86, in our case, people think is the right path or not. At least we've all had that chance to sort of weigh in the design, so that as we grow, people are, a part of that process.
No, that's great, Amir. Thanks for being so thorough on that, for sure. Brad, anything on your?
Well, so this has been painful. In the 3 years before the pandemic began, we distributed about $10 million in loans and grants. In the last 3 years, we've distributed about $700 million in loans and grants. And so that's 9 quarters of running into the fire, financial first responders. Everybody who's on this webinar knows this story because we've all been doing this. But what that led to was predictably uneven distribution of the work in some respects, mistakes that we had to then learn from and correct and improve upon, and staff burnout, which I'd be really careful about. So similar to what Amir had mentioned before, we now have put in place, lightly, it's not bureaucratic really, but nonetheless, it's a process by which we evaluate opportunities rather than me just doing deals and tell everybody about them later, which really is not healthy for the long term, frankly, for everybody's purposes. There's a program launching today, which is a part 2 of a program we ran last time that we're not running this time. It's a $175 million grant program in the state of Illinois, and it kills me that we're not doing that program. But for our staff, I think it was the right thing to do. So that balance is always with us, and we got to strike it carefully, but it has real implications for our financials, for our mission, for everything we're trying to accomplish. So there's one thing that I think is important to cite that we're putting in place now, have put in place, and we're going to be using it for the first time this year. It's the concept of a shared success bonus, where replacing all the bonuses that we used to do sort of ad hoc at the end of the year, depending on evaluation of each individual's performance across the team. We now have a single way to share in the success financially we have as an organization. And simply the way this works is that if we exceed our budget, which means we make more than this year, 11 grand on the P&L, then the growth in unrestricted net assets for the year, we will share 25% of that back with our staff up to $250,000. And we'll share that pro rata based on salary. So I think that that's a way to really underscore how important it is that everybody is invested in everybody else's work towards the same shared goals, and that we all have a really vested interest in understanding what everybody else is doing so that we all work together in order to further what we're trying to accomplish so that we can grow over the long term and do so sustainably. So the mix of saying no sometimes, but also incentivizing growth is something we're trying to get right. And those are a couple of the mechanisms that we're using as well.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. That's fantastic. Rosa, what about you?
Well, I agree with Brad that assessing the opportunity is critical. We were also in the fire with PPP and all of the pandemic. What we decided to do, as you add more staff and have to accommodate urgent demands, we decided that we would be in an expand and contract staffing situation. So when we add new programs that have a very tight window and are escalating in terms of the outcome, we expand staff. They may be on contract, they may not necessarily be full-time. And then we contract and lower our headcount because that contract may be over. But ultimately, it is about valuing the opportunity and whether it's good for the organization, whether it impacts your bottom line in a positive way, and then learning to say no. I mean, we are a statewide organization. Texas has 30 million people. We have demands put on us weekly. And so we stay very, very focused to being a transformational lender, making sure that what we're doing for the customer is our priority. And so we do say no to a lot of requests, and we stay focused to our strategic plan. So managed growth is important. Being focused on the outcomes is critical, and giving yourself the opportunity to say pass on new contracts or new revenue streams that just aren't the right fit at the time.
No, that is fantastic. Thank you all for that. So I want to transition to the next question a little bit about like staffing. So we have obviously seen, I think just like the number of FTEs kind of grow at individual CDFIs. I think just the overall interest in CDFIs too is just having more candidates like actually know what a CDFI is and want to work in the industry. So I guess my question is, so how are you ensuring that your new hires kind of fit with your organization's culture, and kind of what specific steps are you doing during the onboarding process just to ensure this? How about we go, Brad, how about you start us off?
Well, in the hiring process, where we follow some form of hire slow, fire not particularly fast, moderately speedy. I don't really believe in the hire slow, fire fast thing, but in that process, we do take our time in order to make sure that we're finding the right people, and we simply don't want to hire somebody at a reach. So my personal role in our hiring process is nothing more than at the end of a process where I completely trust our team to check ability to do the work, background experience, and the rest. My job is to do a check for culture, and I'm the last interview in the chain. So I'm checking for specific examples, which I'm really transparent about with our candidates. I just tell them, here's why we're here, because you wouldn't be here otherwise, because if you couldn't do the job, I wouldn't be on your calendar. I'm checking for examples for how you as a potential member of our team can embody 4 elements of our culture. I just want examples from your previous work experience that illustrate that. And I want to give each of these folks time to be able to ask me any questions they want, to reinforce for them that they have direct access to me and everybody else in this organization, because we're all in this together. And before you even get hired, you get to ask me any question you want. So we can make sure the value exchange works. This is a really good fit. So we've done I think, pretty well. I mean, everybody makes mistakes in hiring, but we haven't had that many, I don't think, in the last 3 years in particular. We've been really intentional about this. And so that's borne out a little bit. But then the onboarding follows. I want to make sure that everybody who joins our team gets to know everybody in our team quickly, rather than just the people who are specifically working in their area. We've only got 32 people, so it's not that hard, but all the way inclusive of like their own team and the whole of the leadership team, where a third of our organization is part of our leadership team. And when I'm in there, I'm the only straight white male in the room. And I want to not just talk about our values, but I want to also reinforce how important these values are and what we do and how we promote and who we are and who we invite to join us. And so all of that goes into, I hope, setting a really good context for anybody we're seeking to hire. And then we can build upon that from day one when they get hired and thereafter. But it starts with really careful interviewing, I think.
No, for sure. That's great. Rosa, what about you?
Well, we have a committee that changes depending on their availability, but it's a staff committee, and they vet candidates. And we're looking not only at their skill sets and their experience, we're looking at whether they're mission oriented. That's very important on who makes the cut. So we take that short list and we begin to interview. And again, mission has become a very high priority, I would say, in the last 5 years. One of the key questions we ask for the shortlisted candidates is, how does this position fit into your personal aspirations and interest? We really want them to embrace the organization mission, and we're finding that in some cases, if they haven't been engaged in the community doing mission related work of any type, we're willing to bring them on board. And we ask them, would you like us to help you? And we're willing to bring them on board, encourage them to become involved in the community, whatever area of interest they have. We give company time so that they can participate and serve on boards, learn to serve on boards. I've done mentoring on serving in the community and board of directors. And so we encourage that. When they're onboarded, we also require that they read the corporate strategic plan. It's a must read. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do have staff retreats, and we let all of our staff that are volunteering to coordinate the retreat, we're encouraging them to incorporate our values as part of the retreat. We also have our annual scorecard, and so we're evaluating in the scorecard, in our performance outcomes, did we add value to the customer? Did we add value to the communities that we serve, in addition to the dollars of investment and the number of individuals helped? So we have several layers of vetting our candidates, onboarding, and then following through on our mission throughout, their employment and community work.
Great. All right, I want to quickly transition to the opposite, not the opposite, the existing staffs. And Brad had talked about this a little bit, just how much we've all kind of gone through from a workload standpoint and a burnout standpoint. So in terms of just like supporting your employees, like during the pandemic and post-pandemic period, is there anything that you're kind of doing in particular? I know we've talked a little bit about actually like saying no and like just prioritizing, but are there any kind of specific examples that you can kind of give where you're supporting staff, whether it's extra days of PTO or anything like that? How are you ensuring that your staff's not burning out right now? Amir, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I think just to tie the last discussion to the current question, one of the things that was really important to me when I got there, because there was so much transition, there was a bit of a vacuum in leadership that also that existed because there was a lot of transition, and there were multiple organizations, and I knew that we were going through a strategic sort of planning process soon after. I wanted to focus on, before I hired anyone external to the company, to really focus on how do we create opportunities for people within the company. So we spent a great deal of time focusing on growth and development opportunities for individuals. So as we restructured, the objective was to say, is there a person within the organization who has the skills, ability, and will to take on a new role or to elevate within an existing role? And there were a number of changes made resulting in that. I think the second thing that we really thought through was that, as with any organization, particularly we're at 86 employees, so it got to be pretty sizable. There's going to be significant amount of equity issues around compensation and pay that just play themselves out over time. And so we went through a pretty extensive process over this last year of right sizing a lot of compensation, trying to really address issues where particularly issues of gender equity were coming into play with compensation to get a more of a level playing field on base compensation. And then we had to go into even the bonus pool and sort of break down some of the favoritism that creeps into those processes and get them back to a little bit more of a balanced structure, rewarding merit, but also recognizing that, there's a bit of this where there are things that are unseen that also influence compensation models as well that needed to be addressed. So I'd say that was one thing. I think another element that we're struggling with and we're trying to really, get our heads around is that we're, like most organizations, dealing with 5 generations in the workplace, and the needs of a baby boomer and the needs of a Gen Z person are vastly different. And, we have Gen Xers and less so Gen Xers and more millennials who are right in the heart of family formation stage and wrestling with issues of benefits that just, for me, were in some cases were really new. I mean, I came of era from the banking world where it was about your bonus. Many of my colleagues of that era are much more concerned about the lifestyle, the benefits package, the aspects of it that have nothing to do with core compensation of cash. And so it's really recognizing that there's going to be these multiple motivations of people within the workplace and figuring out how to make your model be relevant to them, because you benefit from having all of those different generations in the workplace.
I didn't even tell Amir this, but we actually have a breakout session on this right after this about having 4 generations. So well done. Way to tee it up for us, Amir. All right. So last question. I think there's 30 seconds each, and then we have to go. We have to wrap it up. But thank you so much for this conversation. So last question is basically, we've shared a lot of different things, but for kind of just the fellow CDFIs on the call, what is the most important factor to consider when trying to maintain a strong organizational culture during this period of growth? So Rosa, why don't we start you out 30 seconds, the most important thing to consider?
I would say convey your values on an ongoing basis. What we've done is we have our values with photos of customers on along a wall, so they're permanently displayed, and the values are there for the board, our staff, even our guests to see at any time, on any day. And so we do not forgo touting our values. We call our manner of conducting business the BCL way. We are a transformational lender. We create opportunities for families, and that is the BCL way. So I would say display your values permanently for everyone to see.
That's great. Thank you, Rosa. Brad, yourself?
Yeah, beyond what we talked about related to space and time and pay and all of these things that are really important to employees, I think, honestly, of our 4 core values, the one that is listed first and is the one that we focus most on is accountability, where we got to create clear goals for the outcomes we're trying to achieve, break those down to how that translates into each individual team member's responsibilities, create clear mechanisms to be able to measure all of that really effectively over the course of time, and then give opportunities to talk. Listen carefully, talk honestly about any issues we've got in furthering our mission, so together we can come up with solutions. Not me telling everybody what to do, but everybody else working together to come up with what the right answers are, so together we can put those in place and just keep getting better over time.
That was great. All right. Amir, wrap us up.
Sure. I'm not really saying anything too different than Rosa or Brad, but I'll use the voice of our marketing communications director. Focus on the why, and never stop focusing on the why.
Yes.
That is right. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. We really, really appreciate it. So thank you, Rosa, Brad, and Amir for leading an engaging discussion and for setting the tone for the rest of the forum. So just really quick. So now we're going to be moving on to our 6 breakout sessions, each of which will run for an hour. So during each session, there will be 45 minutes of presentations, and then 45 minutes of presentations and talks from our speakers. And that will be followed by a 15-minute open Q&A in a separate Zoom room. To access the Q&A, you would simply click on the link that is provided in the session description after the panel has finished the presentation. Again, please remember that all sessions are being recorded and it will be available to view on demand via CDFI Connect and OFN's YouTube channel within a week. And then lastly, please join us for the closing plenary today, where we will have a discussion about operationalizing racial equity, inclusion, and accessibility into your lending practices. So thank you for your participation and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Take care.